The crystalline moon of Vorthis was breathtaking, a place where the auroras painted the skies in shifting shades of sapphire and violet, and silver towers pierced the clouds. But to Lysera, those towers were like paintings hung behind glass, beautiful, unreachable. She had been born with congenital neuromuscular degeneration. On Vorthis, that meant her legs were not only weak, they were essentially disconnected from her will. Medical science could have attempted regeneration or cybernetic replacement, but her society's philosophy was different. The Vorthians valued efficiency and saw no point in fixing those who could be accommodated with simpler tools. The hover chair was their answer. It was sleek, silent, and allowed her to move without strain. But it was also a reminder that she existed on the margins. The unspoken truth was cruel. On Vorthis, people who couldn't walk were quietly assumed to be less capable in other ways. They were not invited to exploration expeditions. They were rarely leaders. They lived, yes, but only within the boundaries society found convenient. By the time Lysera reached her third decade, she had stopped imagining what it might feel like to stand on her own feet. That fantasy had faded into something childish, like believing in fairy stories. When she applied for the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program, it wasn't in search of miracles. She simply wanted to see more of the galaxy, other worlds, other peoples. She told herself that if she couldn't change her body, she could at least change her view. Her arrival on Terra was uneventful. Humans were not the most advanced species she'd met, nor the most exotic. But there was a warmth to them, something in their casual ease with strangers that was disarming. She spent the first day in observation, rolling quietly behind the delegation as they toured a human botanical garden. It was on the second day that she met him. Elias Ward wasn't a soldier, diplomat, or scientist. He was a field engineer, one of those people who kept machinery running and solved problems before anyone else noticed them. His uniform was practical, slightly rumpled, and his boots were dusted with the red grit of Mars from his last posting. He had a mechanic's hand's broad palms, calloused fingers, and eyes that seemed to weigh every detail around him. When Elias first saw her hover chair, he didn't flinch or offer the awkward sympathy she was used to. He didn't kneel to her level or speak slower, as though she were fragile. He just looked at her with a kind of open curiosity, as though trying to solve an interesting puzzle. Their first conversation was brief, polite introductions, a shared comment about the strangeness of Earth's humidity. But then, as they lingered behind the group in a narrow museum corridor, Elias asked something that stopped her breath. "Do you want to walk?" The words were not soft or tentative. They were spoken with quiet conviction, like a promise he'd already decided to keep. For a moment, Lysera thought she'd misheard him. Most people avoided that topic entirely, afraid of touching an old wound. But Elias didn't avoid it. He looked her directly in the eyes, as though he could see the unspoken yearning she kept locked away. She almost replied with a practiced answer. "I've made my peace with it," but something in his tone made her pause. There was no pity in it, no "if only" or "I'm sorry." Just the calm certainty of someone who thought this wasn't a dream, but a solvable problem. And that was the first time in many years that Lysera felt a strange, dangerous thing stir in her chest. Hoped out it was absurd, she told herself. Humans didn't know Vorthian physiology. They had no reason to care about one alien's old injury. And yet, something in Elias Ward's gaze made her believe that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Lysera had never been in a human workshop before. She expected something like the clean, antiseptic labs on Vorthis' gleaming surfaces, silent tools, and the faint smell of sterilizing vapor. What she got instead was chaos. The space Elias led her into looked alive. Holographic schematics floated in midair, half-rendered, flickering with constant edits. Spools of wire hung like vines from the ceiling. Tools were scattered across every available surface, not arranged by type but by what Elias called reachability. There was an underlying hum of active machinery, layered with the faint ozone scent of freshly soldered circuits. Her hover chair hissed softly as it adjusted to the uneven floor. She hesitated at the threshold, wondering if this was some elaborate joke. "This," Elias said, moving toward a corner workbench, "is where I do my best thinking." It was hard to imagine anything organized being born here, but his hands moved with confidence as he rummaged through a shelf. Finally, he pulled out a long rectangular case, its surface scratched and stained from travel. "I started this years ago," he said, setting it gently on the bench. "Didn't have anyone to build it for at the time. Guess I do now." When the case opened, Lysera's breath caught. Inside lay two elongated frames shaped vaguely like legs, but not rigid or blocky as she expected. These were smooth, almost organic in their curves, with layered synthetic fibers that flexed like living muscle. Small actuators gleamed at each joint, their design far more compact than any Vorthian prosthetic she'd seen. "What are these?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Neural-sensed exolimbs," Elias replied like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He pointed to a small oval port at the upper intersection of each limb. "Direct neural interface. Instead of you learning to control them, they learn to move with you. Microsecond feedback loops. Adaptive gait patterning. They'll respond faster than your conscious thought." Lysera blinked at him. "You're suggesting they could replace my legs?" "Not replace," Elias corrected with a small smile. "Enhance. Your brain still knows how to send the signals, it's just your body that can't carry them out. These bypass the broken links." Her mind spun. Humans can't possibly know how to interface with Vorthian neuropatterns. Elias tapped the holoscreen on the bench, and her own medical scans appeared, annotated with layers of notes in quick, sharp handwriting. "That's why I've been studying them since I met you." She stared at him. "In 2 days?" he shrugged. "You'd be surprised how much a motivated human can get done in 48 hours. Lysera wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. It took Vorthian medical councils years to approve even the smallest interface prototypes, and most were abandoned for lack of return on investment. Yet here was one man, with a messy workshop and no official funding, claiming he could do what her entire species had dismissed as not worth the effort. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you even bother?" Elias didn't look up from adjusting the exolimb's calibration matrix. "Because someone should have." The answer hit harder than she expected. It wasn't dressed up in noble speeches or pity. It was a statement of fact. In his mind, the injustice wasn't that she had been born without the ability to walk. It was that no one had seriously tried to help her change that. Lysera was suddenly aware of how quiet the workshop had become. The faint clatter of tools was gone. Elias was just looking at her now, waiting. "You're serious," she murmured. "Always serious about my projects," he said with a half smile. "Especially the ones that matter." For years, Lysera had stopped letting herself believe in solutions. Hope was dangerous. It made the inevitable disappointment hurt more. And yet, sitting there in the strange warmth of a human workshop, surrounded by the hum of machines and the scent of metal and ozone, she realized something. Humans didn't seem to care much about what was practical by galactic standards. They cared about what was possible. And if something wasn't possible yet, they tended to make it so. For the first time in decades, she felt that old, forbidden spark flare to life. Not a fantasy, not a vague wish a chance. She still didn't know if it would work. She still didn't know if Elias's invention could truly give her what she'd been denied all her life. The day of the fitting began before the sun rose over the Terran city. Lysera had barely slept the night before, her mind playing a cruel game of tug-of-war. One side whispered, "What if it doesn't work?" reminding her of every failed treatment, every polite rejection from specialists who told her some things cannot be changed. The other side, quieter but stubborn, kept repeating Elias's words, "Do you want to walk?" She arrived at the workshop in the pale blue light of early morning. Elias was already there, sleeves rolled up, adjusting the exolimbs on a hovering diagnostic rig. The artificial muscles flexed and relaxed as he ran the final calibration sequences, like living creatures stretching before a race. "You ready?" he asked without looking up. Lacera's first instinct was to deflect, make a joke, stall for time, but something in his voice told her that this wasn't a moment to hide behind sarcasm. "I think so." He gestured toward a low platform. "In the center of the room. Hover up here. We'll get the harness off your chair and attach the exo sleeves." It was strange to feel excitement and dread in equal measure. As the chair's restraints released and Elias slid the first exolimb into place, Lacera felt the cold press of the synthetic inner frame against her skin. The material was smooth, but beneath it she could sense a subtle vibration like the steady thrum of a ship's engine far away. This might feel intense, Elias warned as he locked the limb into position. "Your brain's about to start talking to something new. There'll be some confusion at first." She barely had time to process the warning before the neural link engaged. The sensation hit her like a surge of electricity down her spine. Not pain, exactly, but a deep, raw awareness. Her mind, so long disconnected from her legs, suddenly had a signal path again. Nerves that had been silent for decades were firing, searching for muscles that weren't there, and finding something else instead. Her breath caught. "It's strange? Good strange or bad strange?" Elias asked, crouched by the control unit. She hesitated. "Both," he chuckled. "Then it's working." The second exolimb connected, more smoothly, as if her brain had already begun to adapt. When she tentatively thought about moving her foot, the artificial toes flexed. The movement was small, but the jolt of recognition, "I moved something," was staggering. "All right," Elias said, standing back. "Let's try it. Use the rail and lean forward like you're going to stand. The exo will handle balance correction." Lacera's hands tightened on the side rail. Her mind flashed back to childhood therapy sessions, doctors encouraging her to stand. Her legs trembling uselessly, the inevitable moment she was lowered back into the chair. She had learned to dread the command "stand up," but now, as she leaned forward, the exolimbs reacted instantly, their synthetic muscles pushing with controlled force. Her knees straightened, her hips aligned, her back rose. She was standing. For a heartbeat, her body froze in shock. Her perspective shifted. The floor felt below her in a way it never had. She could see over the workbench without tilting her head up. The air even smelled different, her lungs expanding more fully as gravity pressed evenly along her body. Elias smiled like he'd just watched a sunrise. "Told you." Her voice shook. I'm upright." "Not just upright," he said, stepping back. "You're ready to move." She stared at him. "You mean walk? That's the idea." The first step was clumsy. She overthought it, lifting her foot too high, swinging her hip awkwardly. But the exo adapted instantly, smoothing the motion. The second step was easier. By the third, she was no longer thinking about which leg to move. Her body was simply doing it. Her eyes burned with tears. She didn't remember giving permission to fall. 30 years of frustration, resignation, and buried longing poured out in those few slow, shaky steps. When she finally stopped, Elias was grinning like he'd just watched someone leap across the sky. "You," she whispered, "just changed everything." Each morning she would arrive just after sunrise, the city streets still quiet, the air carrying that faint coolness before the Terran day's heat set in. Elias would already be there, sometimes hunched over the exolimbs running diagnostics, sometimes tinkering with entirely unrelated devices because, as she was quickly learning, his mind was incapable of focusing on only one project at a time. The first sessions were exhausting. Walking was not just a matter of moving forward, it was relearning her relationship with gravity. Her hips, long accustomed to sitting, resisted the rotational movement. Her shoulders instinctively hunched from years of leaning forward in a upward chair. But the neural sync technology was patient in a way no organic limb could be. Every motion she made, no matter how awkward, was logged, analyzed, and refined. By the end of each day, the exo moved more like her than it had that morning. Emotional adjustments were harder. Elias noticed it first. On the fourth day, after she stumbled over a misplaced cable and cursed under her breath, he caught her expression, a flash of shame, quick but sharp. "Don't do that," he said. "Do what?" "That face. Like you failed just because." "You tripped," she frowned. "You don't understand. For my people, falling is a sign of weakness," he finished, his voice steady. "Yeah, I get it. But here, falling is just part of learning. Babies do it all the time." She tried to imagine a Vorthian child stumbling and laughed despite herself. "We would never allow it. There are stabilizers for that." "Exactly," Elias said with a grin. "Humans? We take the stabilizers off and let kids run into walls until they figure it out." It was absurd, but oddly liberating. By the end of the week, she wasn't just walking. She was jogging short distances across the workshop floor. Her steps no longer felt like deliberate commands, left foot, right foot. Adjust balance, but like the natural rhythm she'd always been meant to have. And then came the day she took the exolimbs out in public. The Galactic Cultural Exchange was hosting an evening reception in the Terran Grand Hall, a sprawling atrium of glass and steel, its vaulted ceiling revealing the night sky beyond. Delegations from 20 worlds were present, their clothing a kaleidoscope of alien fashion. Lysera's arrival caused a ripple before she even reached the main floor. Those who had seen her in the previous days remembered her hover chair. Now, she moved through the crowd under her own power, her head level with people she had always looked up at. The Vorthian delegation spotted her immediately. Her cousin Terran stared with open disbelief. "Lysera, how?" She smiled, savoring the weight of the words before she spoke them. "Not how. Who?" Elias, a few steps behind her, gave a casual wave. "Evening." Terran's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is impossible." Lysera tilted her head. "Not impossible. Human." The statement drew more attention than she intended. A pair of Ethera scientists approached, their silver eyes scanning the exolimbs with obvious fascination. "We heard rumors," one said. "Direct neural adaptation in less than a week? That shouldn't be viable." Elias chuckled. "Shouldn't be, but is." Requests for schematics began almost immediately. Representatives from 3 different species offered funding. A Vorthian medical delegate tried to corner Lysera with questions about whether she'd submit to a long-term study, but Elias stood firm. "Her choice, her design. If she wants it shared, we'll talk. Until then, it's hers." That struck her more deeply than she expected. The exolimbs weren't just a gift, they were hers. Not something for a council to own, not a prototype. To be stripped down and studied without her consent. As the evening wound down, Lysera found herself standing on the balcony that overlooked the city lights. She realized she had walked there without thinking, weaving through the crowd, climbing 2 shallow steps without even slowing. A week ago, she would have had to ask someone to move her chair close enough for the view. Tonight, she simply went. She stood there until Elias joined her, holding 2 glasses of something sparkling and faintly golden. The medical bay aboard the Aurelius was never silent. Machines hummed, diagnostics pinged, and the faint scent of sterile air scrubbers hung heavy. But today, there was a different kind of electricity in the room, not from wires and consoles, but from hearts beating faster in anticipation. Alira sat on the therapy bench, her tail twitching faintly, ears laid back not in fear, but in raw focus. She'd come so far from the day she first met Daniel, back when moving even one toe felt like an impossible dream. Now, after weeks of intense training, the exoskeletal brace on her legs was almost redundant. Almost. Daniel crouched beside her, his face unreadable but his eyes steady. He didn't speak yet, letting the moment build. His hands gently adjusted the last strap of the support brace, but instead of locking it into full assistance mode, he set it to passive. The mechanical servos would no longer carry her weight only. Catch her if she stumbled. All right, he said finally, voice calm but firm. This is it. No frame, no crutches, just you. Alira's throat tightened. Even though she'd been walking short distances with assistance, the idea of no support at all made her chest ache with both fear and longing. I don't know if you do, Daniel interrupted softly, not as a rebuke, but as a PK statement of fact. You've already walked in your mind 100 times. Now you just let your body catch up. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. His strange human confidence had been the lifeline she hadn't known she needed, but this time the words didn't just reach her ears. They rooted themselves in her chest like an anchor against the storm of doubt. He stepped back, leaving just enough space between them. His stance wasn't tense, but she noticed his arms were slightly raised, ready to catch her if she fell. The knowledge that he would catch her was both a comfort and a challenge. Alira took a deep breath, feeling the subtle hum of her muscles, the faint ache in her calves where she'd rebuilt strength. She placed one foot forward, just a small shift in weight. Her leg trembled, and for a heartbeat, her instincts screamed that she was falling. But the exoskeletal brace stayed silent. She had done it. One step, then another. The tremor in her legs didn't fade, but something else started to grow momentum. Each time she moved forward, she remembered the hundreds of micro-adjustments Daniel had taught her. The way to shift her hips, how to keep her gaze forward instead of looking down, how to breathe in rhythm with each movement. By the fourth step, she realized she wasn't thinking about falling anymore. She was thinking about walking. Daniel didn't say a word. His silence wasn't absence, it was trust. He wasn't coaching now because she didn't need the constant reminders. This was her moment, not his. Halfway across the room, her legs began to feel like molten lead. The temptation to stop was strong. But then she caught sight of the large viewing window on the far wall. The stars beyond were sharp pinpricks of light, each one a place she had once thought forever out of reach. And just like that, she understood. This wasn't about walking across a room. It was about walking into her future. She took another step, then another. When she finally reached the far wall, she turned not quickly, but without falling, and met Daniel's gaze. His expression was still steady, but there was something different now. A smile, small but undeniable. You did it, he said simply. Her throat closed up. Not with sadness, but with something that felt like the start of laughter and tears all tangled together. We did it. Daniel shook his head, walking toward her. No, you did this. I just reminded you that you could. They stood there for a long moment, the hum of the medical bay fading into the background. For the first time since the accident that had taken her mobility, Alira didn't feel broken. She felt whole, and when she walked back toward Daniel, unsupported, she realized she was no longer afraid of falling. Because even if she did, she knew how to stand up again.